Hey guys, what is up? Chris here with Cohesive Friendship Unit, just me today. I am excited to make this video. It's a little bit of a different video from what we usually do, but it was super fun because I got to build my new computer. And I think it's very relevant to this channel and very relevant to gaming in 2020 because I built it for a very specific reason, and that was to match or exceed Xbox Series X and PS5. And I made a video earlier, maybe a week and a half ago, about spending your stimulus checks on a computer, what I would personally pick to get as close to or better than Xbox One, Series X, and PS5. And basically I built myself one of those computers with slight variations that I'm going to be covering. So this is the computer that should meet or exceed Xbox Series X and PS5. And yeah, we're just going to dive into everything. We're going to talk about why upgrade now, talk about the comparison of my specs versus the new consoles, and we're going to talk about kind of a post-mortem of my old PC, like why things are the way they are right now. But if you found this video enjoyable, entertaining, helpful, please throw us a like, and we would really appreciate a subscription. This is not necessarily the end of series of videos dedicated to this PC and the lead up to next gen consoles from a PC gamer's perspective. So yeah, subbing might be in your best interest. But first, why now? So I'm going to show the specs of my old system, and if you stick around to the end of the video, there's going to be a timestamp. I will do a post-mortem of that computer in particular, but to keep things laser focused, in general, I'm of the mentality that you should upgrade your computer to suit your needs. I don't really believe in upgrading for the sake of upgrading. I don't think that that's really worth it. That being said, I had plans to be upgrading before the launch of next gen to match or exceed those consoles, because that's going to be the baseline going forward, right? When PS5 and Xbox Series X releases, that Ryzen Zen 2 chip is going to be the new standard for what games are developed on. The Athlon CPUs of old, that's going to be ditched immediately. So I wanted to be prepared and be upgraded when that happened. The upgrade could have happened closer to launch, but given the circumstances, it seemed appropriate. Those circumstances being, I started to notice some performance issues, particularly in Half-Life Alyx, which my computer is slightly under the minimum spec for, to the point where it would be considered unplayable for some people. I was kind of tolerating it because of how much I liked the game, but it was definitely noticeable and definitely not great. I also noticed other performance issues, but nothing really became unplayable until Half-Life Alyx, which unfortunately happened to be one of my most anticipated games. And that kind of launch of Half-Life Alyx all happened at a very similar time for Xbox and Sony to release the specs of their new console. That combined with basically getting that government stimulus check was kind of a green light for me to upgrade. So basically I was seeing performance issues and things that I was doing right now. I was planning on upgrading anyway, and knowing the specs of what I wanted to upgrade to being kind of laid out to me via these next gen machines made it pretty easy for me to pull the trigger on that. So that is the reason why this is being made. So I'm going to show the Xbox Series X specs and mostly be referring to those because in general, especially at least from the CPU side, the Xbox Series X specs and the PS5 specs are very similar, with the exception really of the GPU. CPU is different, but the CPU is more powerful on the Series X, so I am going to be referencing that more than the PS5. But these are the Series X specs that were officially shown by Microsoft, so I'm just going to rattle through really quickly. We have an 8-core Zen 2 CPU at 3.8 gigahertz, which is unbelievable from an upgrade standpoint over what we're coming from Xbox One. The GPU is a 12 teraflop GPU, 52 compute units at 1.825 gigahertz. Memory is 16 gigs of RAM. Storage is a 1 terabyte custom NVMe SSD PCIe Express 4.0. That's a big point. 4K Blu-ray. Ports, not that interesting. So that's what we wanted to at least meet. So now I'm going to be showing off my specs, and first and most important spec, the Build Brew was a Philadelphia special, Philadelphia Dock Street Brewery Man Full of Trouble Porter. So with that being said, let's build. So my specs are as follows, and I'm going to be comparing these directly to Xbox. A Ryzen 3700X, which is an 8-core CPU at 3.6 gigahertz. The reason I picked this is because really the next step up would be the 3800X, which I personally don't feel is worth the added money, especially because I did get a bundle with the motherboard for this particular CPU. Other than that would be the 3900X, which I did consider, but I kind of told myself to cool it. I don't need that, and I'm trying to not go crazy here. And the idea is that this 3.6 gigahertz CPU is going to sit nice and comfy between the PS5's clock speed and the Xbox One X, and the hope is that I can overclock this to at least hit the Xbox Series X, but I am currently running everything at base clocks at the moment. Next is 32 gigabytes of DDR4 3200 RAM. And the reason I went with 32 over 16, honestly, RAM was not as expensive as I thought it was going to be. It was really a last minute thing, but as I'm video editing, I decided that it can't hurt. It really didn't cost that much extra to go from 16 to 32, and from a video editing perspective, it would be helpful. Also, a lot of games right now, like in the now, are calling for recommended specs of 16 gigs, so it's not that far-fetched to think in like, I don't know, it's not unrealistic to think that within 18 months there will be a game that has a 32 gigabyte of RAM recommended spec, and I'll just be ready for that, and in the meantime, video editing will be working for me. Now, the SSD, this was really a sting as far as cost goes to storage. I wanted to meet or exceed next-gen consoles. Next-gen consoles are using PCIe 4 NVMe M.2 drives, or at least NVMe PCI Express 4. So I went with the Corsair Force MP600 M.2 drive, 1 terabyte. This thing is absolutely ludicrous, a bit on the pricey side, but again, I did really want to at least meet those minimum specs, especially because it seems like storage is actually going to matter from a performance standpoint, at least in some regards, moving forward with next gen. So I got a terabyte drive that matches the Xbox Series X drive capacity, but I also threw in, I cannibalized a SATA SSD from my old computer. That's a 500 gigabyte SSD. The plan is to put current games that I'm VR games and like current modern AAA games, so like Cyberpunk 2077, that'll go on the M.2, or any game that can take advantage of this super fast SSD will go on the M.2. It's also the boot drive, and then older games will sit on the SATA SSD. So older games, Dragon's Dogma, or simpler games, Risk of Rain 2, those can sit on the SATA SSD, slower SSD, still super fast, still great performance, and all of my video editing stuff will go on the SATA SSD. So modern games are going to be on this super fast M.2 drive, and I'm optimistic to see how they use this drive, because having it is noticeably outrageously fast. So what about the GPU? Well, for now, no GPU. I'm just cannibalizing my GTX 1080 from my old computer, and the reason for that, and I talked about this in my previous video, is Number one, ray tracing is going to be a big deal in the next generation. Hardware accelerated ray tracing, and that is a GPU which is confirmed to be in Xbox Series X and PS5, both being made by AMD. AMD will be coming out with a ray tracing equipped GPU on the PC desktop consumer end, and the NVIDIA 3000 series will also be coming out. So what's going to happen is we're either going to see the 20 series drop to a point that I think it's worth getting in at a 2080 or a 2080 Ti. We're going to see the 3000 series be very compelling for ray tracing performance, and I'll pick one of those up, or I will pick up an AMD solution. But the competition from AMD makes me think prices are going to be coming down, and I kind of want to get a second generation ray tracing card as opposed to a first generation. And honestly, until next gen drops, the 1080 is still a really rock solid GPU. I'm not like begging for performance right now in that department. All of this is being held together by an ASRock X570 Pro AM4 motherboard. And the reason I picked that motherboard, a couple simple reasons. I needed that PCIe Gen 4 slot for the super fast NVMe SSD that I put in. I needed USB-C for my Oculus Link on my Oculus Quest, and I wanted at least two M.2 slots, even if only one of them is the super fast PCIe Gen 4. At least I have another slot so that in a few years, when storage gets a little bit cheaper, maybe I can pick up a 2 or 3 terabyte drive for like $150 or something, slap it in, much more storage, I'll be good to go. And everything is within a Fractal Design R6 USB-C white. Now I have a brief case rant that I want to get into. I promise I will try to be super quick. First, this is going to sound super old, but back in my day, we had disk drive slots, and I know nobody actually uses disk drives anymore, but these are huge cases and they can accommodate the slot. The form factor is still there, and I used the disk drive slot to put in more front I/O. Speaking of front I/O, hunting for the PC case was one of the harder parts to pick, surprisingly, because it's almost impossible to sort by what you want. I was only able to find about 3 cases on the market for what actually fit my needs. Specifically front I/O. You can't sort by front I/O on really any site. You can't pick the number of USB 3s, the number of USB 2s, and the USB-Cs. You kind of just have to like dig endlessly. Anyways, I could only find 3 cases on the market that fit what I needed, and that was a lot of front I/O because footage that I use, that I capture, that takes up a front I/O slot. Currently in my work from home situation, I need to switch front I/O from my work laptop dock to the front of my computer. That's 2 front I/O slots. And I mean, right off the bat, we're already up to 3 front I/O slots, and most cases these days only have 2 front I/O slots. So I was super happy to find this. It has USB-C, 2 USB 2s in the front, 2 USB 3s in the front. And again, I took that disk drive slot and put more front I/O in it, and it has just been an absolute dream to build in. I also really like having the front glass. I wasn't into it, but I wanted it because I wanted to get good at cable management, and it definitely forced me to do better at cable management, which we'll talk about in the old PC post-mortem. That's my rant. Manufacturers, Newegg, PC part picker, do better at curating your PC cases. That being said, this case is really, really nice. I really would recommend it. So that's the system, guys. It's a Ryzen 3700X, 32 gigs of RAM. Could easily just cut that down to 16. An NVMe Gen 4 Corsair MP600 super fast drive, and GPU is coming eventually. So what are my thoughts on the future and benchmarking, especially in this in the perspective of this computer compared to Series X and PS5? Well, there's no benchmarking now, mostly because we don't have a GPU yet. But if people want, I could make a video with the GTX 1080. I just don't think it fits the theme for this kind of particular series. I could do a game loading video, as I already have the super fast SSD, and while software might not be taking full support of it yet, I can still just load games and do load screens, so we can kind of get a sneak peek of what to expect. And once I do get the GPU, which again should be at or exceeding PS5 and Xbox Series X, we could definitely make some videos showing off the potential of next gen, assuming those consumer GPUs come out before those consoles come out. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you guys are interested in. Now, if you're still here, I'm going to do my old PC post-mortem. So I'm going to post the original specs and the ending specs. Original, I had an i5 4570, and I had 8 gigs of RAM, which actually went up to 16. Then one of the slots died, so I moved down to 12. And for storage, I had a 1 terabyte 7200 HDD, just not solid state, just spinning storage, which I eventually added to with a 500 gigabyte SATA SSD. So the original plan for this case, or PC, was to meet or exceed the PS4 and Xbox, and I didn't want to go Athlon for some obvious reasons, which is why I went with the i5, and I wanted it to have support for the Oculus Dev Kit 1, which it did. The upgrade to the 1080 was to meet or exceed the PS4 Pro and the Xbox Series X, and it really did allow me to comfortably play games at 4K 30 frames per second, especially if I kept my settings kind of in check. All I can really say about it is that the case was bad, and glass wasn't trendy at the time when I bought this system, or bought the case at least, but not having it and me being generally more careless made cable management bad, and I'm a little embarrassed to even be showing this on the internet, but here it is. Not pretty, not great, and I am much happier with the aesthetics that I have now. And the stock cooler and CPU. Stock cooler, not great on Intel, probably should have upgraded. I am comfortable using the stock cooler on the 3700X for the time being, because that cooler is actually reasonably solid. And I'm not a crazy overclocker or anything, but the stock cooler on Intel, probably not that great. But as far as picking a different CPU, it was a weird time. Ryzen wasn't out yet. Ryzen was years away. It wasn't like I was waiting for Ryzen or anything. This was in 2013. So it really, there weren't a lot of CPU options. So I think things actually really worked out. And the computer, all things considered, lasted a really long time and realistically could last longer and will last longer. The system will be going to someone else. Now it only has the 1 terabyte spinning hard drive, and I'm going to put the 7950 back in so you can play some older games at 1080p. Maybe you can still play newer games at 1080p at lower settings, and otherwise it's a decent 720p modern system. And I'm sure I'm still figuring out what I'm going to do with it, but someone will make some good use of it, I'm sure. So that is the post-mortem, and that is this video. Thank you for being here if you made it this long, and that is all for today. I will catch you next time.